Welcome to the Refrigerant 365 podcast, your home for Refrigerant Insights 365. Today I'm joined by Wynand with Future Green Now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. How are you liking the Atmo Summit so far in Atlanta?
Great one. I think it's a good show. There's good attendance. Variety of people at it, OEMs, end users, manufacturers, contractors. So it's been interesting, good content, and
That's
nice
great.
meeting everyone always.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has been you've obviously come here every year, correct?
Yeah. I've been to the US one every year. I had the opportunity to be to a few other ones, Australia, Europe, South Africa. So
That's awesome.
been with the Atmo crowd for a while.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I definitely remember seeing you last year at the Washington D.C.'s.
Yeah.
So it's good to see you again.
No, thank
Yeah.
you.
And so yesterday you had given a talk on day one about CO2 refrigeration systems. So I thought we could go into a little more detail about that. But
Sounds-
first, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us about what Future Green Now is.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, so Future Green Now, our background, we've been doing CO2 for about 18 odd years. That's where we entered the industry on the back of CO2. So we've been innovating a lot over the years, seen a lot of firsts, done a lot of interesting projects around the world, not just US based. So in our previous life, we designed, manufactured, installed, and then we worked in the consultative role about 5 years ago to support CO2 and the uptake of CO2. We believed we wanted to help the industry grow in that. So we're taking on a consultative role, which is product development, engineering support, engineering of specific projects, but we also brought in a technical aspect, so training, commissioning, field support for, as you would know, these systems are as good as they are looked after at. So,
Correct.
So it's good to support. There is a need to support CO2 from the ground up.
Okay. So the mission of your company essentially is to support CO2 systems
That's it.
from start to
finish.
Okay,
That's it.
right. Throughout the life cycle.
And spread the knowledge as much as we can.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you have a fantastic team, right? So you have an incredible team of experts.
No, we got a good team, and
Yeah.
they're all good in what they're doing and all experts in what they're doing.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you for that introduction to Future Green Now. And so yesterday you talked about day one of the conference. You gave a talk on CO2. So did you want to
Sure
go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think the underlying tone or the outcome of the presentation was, like we said, we've been doing this for a long time and we've seen a lot. We've learned, we've had our mistakes, we've had our issues, we've learned through the years of doing CO2. And I think the key light bulb for us is CO2 is just refrigerant, need to keep it simple. And there's a lot of aspects on it. So I think you mentioned before, when we started, you said, there is a big aspect of fear when it comes to CO2, and whether that is lobbyists or you can go into what is created this fear factor around CO2, but the reality is, and the sad reality is, that I think there is an aspect of fear around CO2, that it's complex, it's highly costs, it's not efficient. And I think the goal was to break that down a little bit, to go and say, firstly, take the fear and put it behind you. It's just a refrigerant. And if you take the fear out of it, you will simplify your systems. And we've seen that no matter what technology you put on a system, no matter how you look at a system, if you don't take the complexity out of a system, you don't see the efficiency benefit, number one. Number two, the cost factor associated with it goes down if you simplify systems. And then number three, the support from the ground up. It's easier to train guys on a system that's easier to follow, easier to understand, than it is with throwing a massively overcomplicated system at the technicians and at people in the ground that has to do it from day one.
Okay. Yeah. And you mentioned the different concerns that people have with CO2. And how would you address each of those concerns? How would you negate those concerns? I know you went into detail about that yesterday, so I thought that was really interesting in the ways that you answered those. And
So I think it's like we said, it's number one, understanding that CO2 is just a refrigerant. There's a lot of stability around CO2. If you think about it, we got the high pressure valve, we got a flash gas valve introduced, so that takes care of what happens on the high side. If you look at an HFC system, the high side affected what happens at the low side as well.
Okay.
liquid quality feeding to your evaporators. So from a design point of view, you can really simplify what's happening at the bottom. And then again, I think the cost factor, what we've seen is if you simplify stuff and you take the complexity levels out of it, you can reduce the cost of these systems and have them become closer to parallel, closer to par with what we find on the HFC systems. And then controls is important. If you set something up important, if you set something up properly and you make sure that your controls are defined and refined and allowing the system to work stable, you find the efficiencies coming back with that.
Excellent. So you said CO2 is just a refrigerant. And so I'm kind of curious what led you to CO2? Because you talked a little bit about how you've been in it for 18 years, correct?
Yeah.
So what made you, how did you come?
How did I get into
Yes,
CO2?
yes.
So I did my postgrad on CO2 heat pumps.
Okay.
So when I finished that, I obviously wanted to enter the industry, and that was early days of CO2. And I was fortunate enough to come across a company where one of the end users went to Europe and
Okay.
just saw the whole move going to CO2, and they wanted to introduce that back into South Africa. And I
Okay.
ended up going to a company, and we started just pioneering and helping them go to CO2. So that's how we got into it. And we've been, like I said, we were in the beginning where we looked at cascade over CO2 systems. We had all the complexities in it, and over years we literally could see these systems just becoming smaller, less complex, more defined, as we just took out all these fears and
Okay.
componentry associated with backup safeties and everything that
Gotcha.
that people think is necessary to overcome CO2.
Awesome. So would you say that's your favorite refrigerant?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay.
CO2 is so flexible and it's so forgiving in a lot of aspects
Yeah.
that, I mean, we've mentioned it before. We've seen we dabble in industrial. We do a lot of industrial projects as well. We have 10 different suction groups or temperature groups on a single system. Like, there's a lot of flexibility that goes along with CO2. Like, if you find those benefits and that comes with CO2 as a refrigerant, there's a lot you can do. The heating side of life is something that we overlook completely. There's so much heat capabilities and possibilities. You will see at the show here, there's pro refrigeration with chillers for the dairy industry to supply the hot water side of life. There's heat pumps coming into the industry. So there's so much you can do with CO2. You can literally, if you look at what we need from a refrigeration point of view, between hydrocarbons, CO2, and ammonia, we honestly can cover the requirements of the cooling space and the heating space in the industry. So we don't need other refrigerants around anymore. Okay, there's a solution for everything that we want.
Yeah. So you're thinking it's like a future-proof option for folks that are looking to make the right choices about the refrigerants.
I think that was one of the outcomes of the study, is like what do end users that's been through the journey of going to CO2, outside of legislation and regulations, which is perceived as the main driver, we found that the end users find the stability and the focus that they get out of it to be the benefit. As it's like, I can imagine the burden that a lot of end users have around the HFC and spectrum at this stage is every year there's a new flavor, something that you have. So you can't focus on a 15, 20-year process if you don't know what's changing tomorrow night. With CO2, it's like you bring that peace of mind to the end user that this is it. This is what we're going to do for the next foreseeable future, and no systems we put in now, it's going to last for 20 years. We're not going to have to negate it. So it brings that focus back to go and say, like, well, this is it. So let's improve it. Let's make it better. Let's back this refrigerant because it's a future-proof solution.
Right. And there's a lot of people right now that are really thinking about the HFC phase down in the United States. So I think this is a really good conversation to have about CO2 and how it is a future-proof option.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say in terms of, y'all, you do a lot of training. So in terms of the compliance requirements for CO2, what would you say to people? Is it you said it's very simple. So like could you go into a little more detail about that process?
From a training point of view?
Yeah. A little bit of both, I guess.
I think a lot in the training that we see as well, again, is a little bit of the fear factor. So I think it's number one is we try to, in the training is we try to break down CO2 again into its basics, to go and say, like, we mentioned it before, you take the high pressure valve, you take the flash gas valve, understand what it is and what it has to do. Everything else works and operates in the same way that you've been doing it at this moment. So
Okay.
I think from a training point of view, it is it's important to get technicians comfortable with it. It's just the same thing from a design point of view. You need to get rid of the fear. You need to put the simplicity back into the design of a system. The same with the technician support. You need to get rid of the fear and put the comfort there to work on these refrigerants. And my experience, our experience with it is going from that scare factor to working with CO2 to actually working with it, getting comfortable with it. It's like there's no turning back. We've had like the technicians, our experience previous outside of the US, but the guys were like fighting who wants to be the ones doing the CO2 stores versus the HFC stores. Like they wanted to rather work on the CO2 stuff than the HFC
That's
stuff.
awesome.
Because it's also
Okay.
been, I think one thing that's made the industry really interesting again is this whole change and move towards natural refrigerants.
Yeah.
It brought again a bit of a challenging factor, and it made refrigeration interesting again. Let's face it, it went from catalog selection to, this is how we've done it for 20 years to like, I have to think a little bit. And
Yeah.
this is
Think a little
exciting.
bit. Yeah.
And this is and a lot of people have found it to be interesting again. From a compliance point of view, I think if you look at CO2 is making its way into a lot of the light industrial sectors as well, where regulation comes into play with the high HFC charges. So people are really changing HFCs to CO2. And then also ammonia does bring certain aspects of, if you're close to a residential area or a populated area, there is a lot of regulation and compliance factors that has to go into an ammonia system, which CO2 doesn't have all of those regulatory or compliance issues around it. So a lot less maintenance. You don't need to reclaim the gas. You don't need to get the fire marshal out to sign everything off. So there is a lot of positives in going CO2 as well.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And in terms of the balance in the industry right now versus people that are comfortable versus the ones that are fear mongering, what would you say that like the percentage makeup is?
Sadly enough, I would say the
Sadly,
comfort levels and the how can I say, the manpower to work on CO2 systems is probably currently the biggest, I would say, restraint or constraint
okay.
of really going and putting volume behind CO2. And I think, I don't know if you've spoken to a lot of end users and probably have. So like, and I think that's like the number one topic or issue in front of all of them is like, we're happy to have 5 OEMs, we're happy to have 5 this, but we need 100 technicians plus. We need thousands of technicians to be able to work on it. And I think it's literally something that needs to be addressed properly. And comes back to the beginning of the conversation is, I believe if you get the foundations and the basics right, and if you start simplistic and build onto the complexities at a later stage, you support the downstream and you support the field as well with that.
That's awesome. In terms of solving that challenge, is that something that you're currently doing, right? Is there any resources or things that you could point to for folks that are?
Well, I think the resources or the availability is there. I mean, CO2 is not a brand new refrigerant. It's been utilized a lot around the world on a daily basis. So I think there is a lot of knowledge from OEMs, contractors, consultants around the world that can be brought back and applied.
Okay. So you think it's more of like getting people interested in working on CO2 systems and training them, correct? Because the resources are there, is what you're saying. It's just more about the manpower.
Yeah, and I think it's about breaking the barriers.
Okay.
It's breaking the barriers to entry.
Yeah. Well, this is a perfect place for this conference is a perfect place to help spread that message, right?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to we need to keep spreading it outside the walls, because I think, these conferences are great, but everybody here has already broken down at least broken at least some of those barriers. That's why they're here.
Right.
So we need, so it's, I think it's in the hands of everybody that's attending this conference to go outside of this conference and spread that resources, knowledge, and what we've got here, and taking it outside. We represent, at this conference, we represent a drop in the expertise or the manpower that's working in the refrigeration industry outside on a daily basis. So I think what the NASRC is doing is great, having training, taking it to the technicians, taking it to ground level. So that is great initiatives to see. Is like, I think collaboratively, the people that's attending conferences like this and having overcome some of those barriers, or working at breaking them, need to spread it out, get it to the rest of the crowd.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your work on CO2 refrigeration systems today on the Refrigerant 365 podcast. And I hope you enjoy the rest of day 2 of the summit, and
You too.
safe travels.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Sure.
Feel free to like and subscribe. Thank you.